I had never seen my mother cry. Not once. I am not exaggerating. There was this one time we watched Hachi, A Dog's Tale, together. You know, the movie about the dog who waits at the train station every day for the owner who never comes back. I was a complete wreck. Ugly crying into my popcorn, mascara everywhere. My mother sat next to me completely composed, dabbing the corner of one eye with the back of her hand. "Allergies," she said, dabbing the corner of her eye without even looking at me. "Mom, you are crying," I said, staring at her. "Susie, it is allergies," she said firmly, and that was the end of that. She took that to her grave. The woman would not crack. So when I pulled into my parents' driveway that Saturday morning and walked through the front door and heard it, a sound I had never heard in that house before, this deep, broken wail coming from upstairs, I did not even take my shoes off. I just ran. The bedroom door was open. My mother was sitting on the edge of the bed in her robe, face in her hands, shoulders shaking. She was not dabbing the corner of one eye. She was not blaming allergies. She was crying the way people cry when something inside them has completely given way. I had never seen her like this in 26 years. I started crying before I even reached her. I do not know why exactly. I did not even know what had happened yet. It was just the sight of her, my mother, the steadiest person I had ever known, falling apart. I grabbed the tissue box off the nightstand and sat down beside her and put my arms around her, and she leaned into me, which she almost never does. My mother does not lean on people. That alone told me everything I needed to know about how bad this was. "Mom, talk to me. Where is Dad?" I asked, smoothing her hair back the way she used to do for me when I was small. She did not answer right away. She just cried for another minute, and I held her, and then she pulled back and reached over to the nightstand and picked up a folded piece of paper and handed it to me without a word. I unfolded it. I read it. Then I read it again. "My name is Susie Andrews, and this is the story of how I helped my mother get even." The letter was short. My father, Frank, was never one for long explanations. He was leaving. He was in love with Nancy and wanted a divorce. My mother needed to move out of the house before they came back, because the house was in his name. That was it. No apology, no conversation. Just a letter left on a nightstand like a sticky note. I folded it back up and set it down very carefully and pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, watching me pull out my phone. "Calling him," I said. She did not try to stop me. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was normal, relaxed, like I had called him to ask what he wanted for dinner. "Hey," he said. "Dad, Mom is sitting here crying. What is going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed. Not the sigh of a man who feels guilty. The sigh of a man who is tired of a conversation he saw coming. "Susie, you read the letter. You know what's going on," he said flatly. "You left a letter. You did not even talk to her," I said. "It was easier this way," he replied. "Easier. For whom?" I wanted to say 100 things. I did not say any of them. I just said very quietly, "Okay, Frank," and I hung up. That was the last time I called him Dad. I set the phone down and looked at my mother. She was watching me with those red-rimmed eyes. "Pack your things," I told her. "You are coming home with me." "Susie, the house," she started, "is not worth fighting for. Not anymore. Let him have it. Let them have it." "You are not staying here," I said, leaving no room for argument. She looked around the room for a long moment. I watched her look at it, the furniture, the photos on the wall, the curtains she had picked out herself, and then something in her face settled, like a decision being made. She nodded, and she got up and started packing. We were almost done when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I picked up anyway. It was a text, not a call, from Nancy. "Just wanted you to know that your dad finally chose someone who deserves him. Sorry, not sorry. He upgraded, sweetie. Hope you and your mom can accept that." I read it twice, then I showed my mother. She closed her eyes for a second. I typed back, "Upgraded? You mean the woman who has never held a job and has been living off grandfather's money her whole life? That upgrade? Sure, Nancy. Whatever helps you sleep at night." She did not respond. 2 days later, she texted my mother directly. Something about how Frank was happier now and how my mother should be mature enough to accept it and move on. I saw the text on my mother's phone while Mom was in the shower. I typed back from my own phone, Nancy, you went after your own sister's husband and moved into her house, and you want to talk to us about being mature? That is genuinely impressive. The audacity is a gift. Please never lose it." She went quiet again. Then Frank called me. "Susie, you need to stop upsetting Nancy," he said. His voice had that tone, the tone of a man who has already decided whose side he is on. "I am upsetting Nancy," I repeated slowly. "She is sensitive right now. This is a big change for everyone, and—" he started. "Frank?" I cut him off. "Tell her to stop texting me and my mother, both of us. If she sends one more message, I will respond, and I promise you I will not be nice about it. Are we clear?" I said, each word deliberate and calm. A pause. Then, "Don't call me Frank. Have some respect. I am your father," he said. "Then act like a father," I told him. Then I hung up. Nancy never texted us again. I should tell you a little about my Aunt Nancy, since she is so central to this story. Nancy is 29 years old. My mother is 48. They are half-sisters. Same father, different mothers. My grandmother passed away when my mother was young. My grandfather remarried, and Nancy came along. There is a 19-year gap between them, and they were never particularly close. Nancy is pretty. I will give her that. She has always been pretty in that obvious, polished kind of way. But she grew up watching my mother's life from the outside. The nice house, the established husband, the daughter who had things, and she never quite got over it. She was 3 years older than me, which meant she spent most of our childhood and teenage years finding ways to take little jabs at me. Too spoiled, Susie. Too dependent, Susie. You think everything will just be handed to you forever, Susie. This from a woman who had never worked a day in her life and was surviving entirely on money our grandfather left behind. I did not say that at the time. I just listened and filed it away. After that, I went out and built something of my own. I am 26 years old. I have worked in the same office for 4 years, starting from the bottom and earning every step up. My own apartment, my own car, my own savings, not because I had to, because I wanted Nancy's words to mean nothing. They meant nothing. Now let me tell you about my mother, because my mother is the real story here. Ella Andrews is the kind of woman people turn to look at when she walks into a room. Not because she is trying, because she simply is. I have lost count of the number of times strangers have stopped us and asked if we are sisters. We are not sisters. She is my mother, and she is 48 years old. And she is, without question, the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. She is also the woman who gave Frank everything when he had nothing. Her savings, her years, her career put on hold after her breast cancer diagnosis, caught early, no surgery required, but recovery still took everything she had. Who spent the years that followed raising me and running that house and quietly making his entire life possible. She built everything he had, and he left a letter on the nightstand. My apartment was not built for 2 people. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where you could reach the counter from pretty much any point in the room. My mother took the bed. I took the couch. Neither of us complained. The first couple of weeks were quiet. My mother is not a woman who processes things out loud. She moves through grief privately, and she came out the other side of each day a little steadier than the one before. I did not push her. I just made sure she was eating and that there was always coffee ready in the morning. After about a month, she started cleaning things that were already clean, reorganizing shelves that did not need reorganizing. I recognized it for what it was. She needed to build something, needed her hands busy. One afternoon, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said simply, "I want to work." "Good," I said without missing a beat. "Let's find you something." I had heard through a friend that a car dealership nearby was looking for front office staff. I mentioned it casually. She went in for an interview on a Tuesday. She had the job by Tuesday afternoon. This surprised no one who has ever met my mother. The dealership was owned by a man named Hank Samuels, 48 years old, same as my mother. Handsome in a steady, unpretentious way, the kind of man who does not need to announce himself when he walks into a room. He had built that business over many years, and he ran it the way he did everything, with patience and good judgment and a complete absence of ego. He met my mother on her first day. He told me later that he knew from the very first conversation that she was someone he wanted in his life. He said it without drama, the way you state a fact you have already accepted. I watched my mother come alive again over the months and years that followed. She came home from work with color in her face. She laughed at things again. She started wearing clothes she loved instead of just clothes that were clean. She looked the way I imagined she looked before everything. Before Frank, before the business, before she was told her job was to disappear into someone else's life. She looked like herself. The divorce was finalized about a year after she moved in with me. She did not fight for the house. She did not go after Frank's business, the business she had funded with her own savings. People asked her why, and she always said the same thing. She did not want anything that carried his fingerprints. She was building something new. Nancy moved into the house. The house my mother had cleaned and decorated and filled with years of herself. Nancy moved in and called it a win. We let her think that. So 4 years later, Hank called me. He did not call me often. We had a good relationship, easy, comfortable, but he was not a man who reached out without a reason. So when I saw his name on my screen on a Tuesday evening, I picked up on the first ring. "Susie," he said, his voice steady and certain. "I want to marry your mother." I sat down on my couch, and I was so glad he said that. "I know," I said quietly, because I did. I had known for a while. "I want it to be something she remembers," he said. "Something that means something. I was hoping you might help me figure out how to do that." I told him I would think about it. Then, a wedding invitation arrived 3 days later. My mother called me at work, voice completely even, which was how I knew she was processing something complicated. I drove over after my shift. We sat at her kitchen table, her new kitchen table, in her new apartment, which she had been in for about 2 years by then, decorated exactly the way she wanted, with zero input from anyone else. And we looked at the envelope. Frank Andrews and Nancy Whitfield. "Cordially request the honor of your presence." I set it down. "They invited us," I said, still staring at the envelope. "They want to believe that 4 years is enough time for everyone to be fine," my mother said evenly. "That we will come and sit quietly and smile and make it all look normal." "Are we going?" I asked. She looked at me. That slight curve at the corner of her mouth that I had learned, over the past 4 years, meant she was thinking something she had not said yet. "We are going," she said. "Good. Because I want to say a few words," I told her. She picked up her tea. "I thought you might," she said almost to herself. "Will you be okay sitting there?" I asked. "Susie," she said, setting her cup down, "I will not be sitting there alone." She had already asked Hank, and of course he said yes. I drove home that night with the invitation on the passenger seat and an idea forming that I could not quite talk myself out of. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, I had stopped trying. I called Hank. "I have an idea," I said. "About the proposal." A pause. "I'm listening," he said. I told him. A longer pause. "Susie," he said slowly, "that is somebody else's wedding." "I know," I said. "Your father's wedding," he pressed. "I am aware," I said. Another pause. I let him sit with it. Then he said, "Your mother would never agree to this." "Which is why," I said, "we are not going to tell her." Silence. I could hear him thinking. "Hank," I said, "you know what Nancy told us when this whole thing started? She texted me, out of nowhere, to let me know that my father had leveled up. That is the word she used. Leveled up. Like my mother was something to be traded in." He did not say anything. My mother walked away from that house with nothing because she did not want anything that had his fingerprints on it. She built everything she has now by herself. And Nancy is out there calling it leveling up, I said. I just want my mother to walk into that room and let everyone see exactly who leveled up. A long silence. Then Hank said quietly, "I already have the ring." "I know you do," I said. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do it." On the morning of the wedding, Hank found me in the parking lot before we went in. My mother was still in the car touching up her lipstick, which gave us about 45 seconds. He reached into his jacket pocket and held out a small velvet box. I took it. Opened it. I had not expected it to stop me the way it did. But it did. It was the kind of ring that tells you everything about the man who picked it. Not flashy, not trying to announce anything. Just quietly, undeniably beautiful. The kind of ring you choose when you actually know the woman you are giving it to. I looked at it for a second longer than I meant to. "Hank, this is so beautiful," I said softly. "Yeah," he said, like he already knew what I was going to say. I closed the box, tucked it into my clutch. "Don't miss your cue," I told him. He smiled. "Don't miss yours," he said. The venue was a banquet hall about 40 minutes out. Early spring, nice enough day, the kind of event that probably looked beautiful in the planning stages. My mother wore a deep rose dress. I will not spend too much time describing it because the dress is not the point. My mother in the dress is the point. She walked in on Hank's arm, and I watched heads turn, one after another, like a slow wave moving through the room. She was not trying. She never tries. She just exists. And that is enough. Hank was in a charcoal suit, hand at the small of my mother's back from the moment they walked in. He did not move it once. I watched Nancy notice my mother from across the room. I was too far away to read her expression clearly, but I saw the moment, the slight stiffening, that quick flicker across her face. Nancy looked beautiful in her wedding dress, genuinely. But beautiful and luminous are different things, and my mother was luminous, and Nancy had always known, somewhere deep down, that she would never quite win that particular comparison. I sat through the ceremony, smiled when appropriate, ate my dinner, made polite conversation with the people around me. I was perfectly pleasant the entire evening. I was also waiting. The speeches came after dinner. Best man, maid of honor, a few relatives raising glasses. Each one sat down and the room settled a little more into the comfortable looseness of a reception winding toward dancing. When the last speaker sat down, I felt the room exhale. That was when I stood up. I raised my glass and smiled and said, "Loud enough for everyone. Wait, I have something to say to the lovely couple." The room went still. Across the room, I saw Frank's face change. Not dramatically, just a slight tightening around the eyes. The look of a man who has just realized something is about to happen and cannot stop it without making it worse. Nancy looked at me. I smiled at her. "Hi, everyone. I am Susie, Frank's one and only daughter, and I just want to take a moment to say a few words about the happy couple." I talked about Frank first. Warm, generous, the kind of speech people expected from a daughter at her father's wedding. I talked about the business he built. I talked about what he had provided. I kept my voice soft. I watched people relax, watched them decide this was going to be fine, that I had made peace with everything, that the evening would proceed without incident. Then I turned to Nancy. And Nancy, a pause, just one beat. My mother's half-sister, who decided that going after someone else's husband was not only acceptable but something worth celebrating. The room shifted. You could feel it. Nancy always had a lot to say about me growing up. Spoiled, she said. Too dependent. Would never make it on my own. I tilted my head. This is coming from a woman who has never held a single job in her life and has been surviving off our grandfather's inheritance since she was old enough to spend it. A laugh escaped from somewhere in the crowd. Someone tried to cover it. But here we are. Nancy is marrying my father, the man whose business exists because my mother handed him her life savings before he had anything, the man who asked my mother to step back from her own career when she got sick, the man who let her raise me and run his house and build his life for years and then left a letter on the nightstand telling her to get out because the house was in his name. Frank pushed his chair back. "Susie, that is enough," he said, his voice low and tight. "Make her stop." Nancy's voice came sharp and high from beside him. I looked at them both. "Don't worry," I said pleasantly. "I'll stop." I turned back to the room, and I smiled, the kind of smile that means you have been saving the best part. "But before I do, I want everyone to look at someone," I said, turning toward the back of the room. I raised my glass. "My mother, Ella Andrews," I announced. Every head turned, and there she was, deep rose dress, Hank's hand at her back, utterly composed, not performing anything, not trying to be anything, just standing there being exactly who she was, which was more than enough, more than anyone in that room could look away from. "My beautiful, gorgeous mother," I said, and I let the room look at her for a moment before I continued. "The woman strangers stop on the street because they are convinced we are sisters. Independent. A career woman who built herself back up from nothing and never once asked anyone to carry her." I paused to let that settle. "And this handsome man standing next to her, that is Hank. I said, smiling wide, bright, like I was sharing the best news in the world. Hi, Hank. Look, isn't he something, everyone? Handsome, successful, and perfect for my beautiful mother. A ripple of warmth moved through the room. Someone clapped. Someone laughed in that delighted, surprised way. He is going to be my stepfather, by the way, I continued. And I want everyone in this room to know he chose my mother. Every single day, without being asked, without needing a reason, he just chose her the way she always deserved to be chosen. I let the silence hold for exactly one beat. Then I looked at Frank. Frank looked at the table. You told me my father leveled up, Nancy, I said, turning to her. Nancy lifted her chin. Yes, he did. He absolutely did, she said. I smiled at her, warm, patient, like I was about to agree with every word. Look at my mother, I said quietly, and then tell me who leveled up. I set my glass down. Then I walked toward my mother's table, reached into my clutch and set the small velvet box in front of Hank. He looked at it. He looked at my mother. He picked it up and he stood and he got down on one knee. The room exploded. Not everyone. Frank's side of the room sat in frozen silence. But everyone else, everyone who knew the history, who had watched my mother walk in on Hank's arm and understood exactly what they were seeing, who had just listened to every word, they were on their feet before Hank finished the sentence. Ella, he said, his voice steady and full, will you make me the happiest man in the world? She looked at him for 1 second, shocked. Yes, she said simply. The applause was so loud I felt it in my chest. I held out my hand to my mother. She took it. She stood. Hank stood beside her, and the three of us walked out of that hall together, and we did not look back. I found out later, through a family member, that Nancy had been crying at the venue. Not openly. Not in a way she would ever admit to. She was trying to hold it together, trying to act normal, trying to look like a woman who was absolutely fine on her wedding day. But apparently, the mascara told a different story, and the people sitting close enough to see it had a very hard time keeping straight faces. I was told it was, in the words of the family member who relayed this information, genuinely funny to witness. I did not find out about this until after I had already gotten the text. We were barely out of the parking lot when my phone buzzed. It was Nancy. You destroyed my wedding, she texted. I read it. I looked out the window for a moment. Then I typed back. You destroyed my mom first, both of you. And hey, at least I made it memorable, yes? So, bye. I set the phone down. Then I picked it up again, because I had just remembered something. I reached over and took my mother's hand, her left hand, the one with the ring Hank had slipped onto her finger not 20 minutes ago, and I held it up toward the light and opened my camera. It caught the light perfectly. The ring, her hand, everything. It was, objectively, the most beautiful thing I had ever photographed in my life. My mother looked at me. I smiled at her. She shook her head slowly, but she did not pull her hand away. I sent it to Nancy. Isn't it gorgeous? Oh, my good Lord, this is so pretty. Can I see yours? Nancy did not text back. She has not texted me since. Frank, however, had plenty to say. How dare you embarrass us like that? I stared at that message for a good 10 seconds. Then I typed back slowly, the way you do when you want every word to land exactly right. Embarrass you? With what? The truth? You cheated on Mom with her half-sister, a woman who has never worked a day in her life. Isn't that embarrassing enough? So congratulations, Frank. You left the woman who funded your business and built your entire life so you could spend the rest of yours supporting someone who has never earned a single thing on her own. And that money you're spending on Nancy, that's Mom's money too. Hope it goes far. And I hope you have a little bit of shame to pay Mom back with interest. But I guess you won't because you're not embarrassed enough. He did not respond. They both went quiet after that, and they have stayed quiet. Good. A few months later, my mother called me into the kitchen and sat me down. I received a wire transfer this morning, she said, from the business. Frank paid me back, plus a share of the earnings over the years. I stared at her. Mom, that is your money. I know, she said simply. That is why I transferred it to you. And she stood up to put the kettle on, which meant the conversation was over. That was the most Ella Andrews thing she had ever done in her life. I guess Frank is embarrassed enough. I wonder if Nancy is happy about it, though. But you know what? I don't care. My mother and Hank got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Just the people who mattered. She wore ivory and she was, I will say it plainly, the most beautiful bride I have ever seen in my life. I was her maid of honor. I gave a speech that made half the room cry and the other half laugh, and I did not say one unkind thing about anyone. I did not need to. My mother's face said everything. About a month after the wedding, Hank sat me down and told me he had found a condo. For you, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I blinked. Hank, I started. Before you say anything, he said, leaning forward, I know what you are going to say. You worked for your independence. You do not want anyone thinking you are after money. I know all of that. I know who you are. He folded his hands on the table. And I want to do this anyway, because you are my daughter now, whether you like it or not. I said no. He did not accept no. I live in a condo now. It is beautiful. Not luxurious, but beautiful. Bigger than anything I would have chosen for myself, with a balcony and a kitchen that fits more than one person. I pay him rent because I wanted to and I feel bad, but he deposits the rent money directly into a savings account he set up in my name, which I did not find out about until 3 months in. The condo is next door to their house. I can walk over for coffee in 2 minutes. My mother usually has something on the stove by the time I get there. Hank pretends he did not hear me knock and makes me ring the bell every single time and then opens the door like he is surprised to see me. He is not surprised to see me. I am always there. As for Frank and Nancy, the business is doing fine. Frank was always good at running it. He just needed someone else to fund it first. The marriage, however, is a different story. Nancy has been maxing out Frank's credit cards without so much as a part-time job to show for it. I was told Frank has been heard saying, more than once, that his daughter was right all along. They argue constantly. Got bad enough that he threatened divorce, which sent Nancy into a full panic. Where exactly would she go? So I hear she is trying now, doing just enough to keep the peace and the credit cards. Not change, just survival. And my mother wakes up every morning next door to a man who chose her, in a life she built for herself, in a home that carries none of the old weight. Nancy called it leveling up. Look at us and tell me who leveled up. So there you have it, folks. That is our story for today. And please, drop a comment and let me know. Where are you listening from? I always love knowing how far these stories travel. It means more than you think. If you enjoyed this one, please like and subscribe. It truly helps this little channel grow. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. This is Melodic Vengeance. I will see you on the next one. Take care. Okay?
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.